again. Let's talk a little bit about coalition building. Coalition building within Congress. We went over how a bill becomes a law, and we know that it needs to pass through the House, also needs to pass through the Senate in order to get sent to the president's desk. To do that, there needs to be a lot of what's called coalition building, meaning you got to get the right amount of votes. In the Senate, that means it's a majority. There's 100 senators. You got to get 51 votes. In the House of Representatives, there's 435 representatives. It means you have to get 218 votes, or the majority of who votes. Assuming all 435 vote, you got to get 218 of those, which means you have to build a coalition. So if you've ever watched like the show Survivor or any kind of one of those shows where somebody's voted off the island, then that's coalition building. You've got a group of allies that you're trying to build to that group. Obviously, there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. If you are part of the majority party, then theoretically you have a majority already, hopefully. Now, that doesn't mean the opposition's also trying to build a coalition. So they're kind of seeking out the weak links, like who's the person that we can most get to flip. If anybody was paying attention to the impeachment, we kind of talked a lot about how the Northeast is very liberal, the South is more conservative. So like Southern Democrats are much more conservative Democrats. So if the Republicans want to get somebody to kind of jump on their side, they might focus on some of those Democrats from the South, particularly in states, or if you're talking about the House of Representatives, in districts that, have a lot of conservatives that live there. So thinking that in the next election, if a representative doesn't vote the way they like, those conservatives are going to rise up and vote them out. If you looked at the impeachment, I know they talked a lot about Susan Collins from Maine. She was a senator from Maine. They thought they could get to flip, but the Democrats were thinking, again, she's from the Northeast, a little liberal. The town or the state is not quite as conservative, so they might not, think very highly of her voting against impeachment. So the Democrats worked her pretty hard. So that's all about building a coalition. You got to find out who your voters are, and you got to keep them in line. Remember, we talked about party whips. Party whips make sure everybody has the right information, make sure everybody has when the vote is, they know when the vote is. They also want to keep track of how you're voting, and this is how the party expects you to vote. Now, we kind of talk a lot about Democrats and Republicans sticking together. That being said, they don't always vote the same way. It's not like in like Europe or other countries where if you're a member of such and such party, you've got to vote with the party. You don't have to do that here. So our party unity scores are pretty high, meaning Democrats vote with Democrats, Republicans vote with Republicans. There are always some that kind of wander away from the flock. So party whips kind of make sure that people are kind of in line. Congressional staff also leads to coalition building. They help to lobby those congressmen that aren't on board. Congressional staff also helps to make up the mind of the congressman for sure. Other congressmen are also in your ear. And this kind of plays out when you're not necessarily super passionate about an issue. If I'm there and I'm like, I don't really care really if we give more money to the military or not. That's not my baby. I don't necessarily don't want it to happen, but I don't really care if it does. If I'm kind of one of those guys that's in the middle, other congressmen might say like, hey, I really think like you should vote for this, and they might kind of pressure me. Or it might be a situation where I really don't know, like, is it going to be good for us to give more money, or is it going to be bad? I'm unsure. I don't feel very knowledgeable about it. I might go to congressmen I really trust, like Congressman Sarah Detling. She seems to know a ton about the military, so I'm going to ask her. She seems to be the one that has knowledge. In whatever way she tells me to vote, I'm going to trust her and follow her. So sometimes that happens too. Other incentives. People are always kind of lobbying you to be part of their coalition. We talk about actual lobbyists from interest groups that are pressuring congressmen they're trying to form their own coalition. They want to get the right amount of votes to vote for something they like or against something they don't. So all those people they gave campaign contributions to, you better believe they're on the phone saying, hey, Billy, like, please vote with us. And they're also supplying a lot of information to people. This is why you need to vote a certain way. and working with congressmen that are more friendly to try to influence those that are undecided. Do they think they can win over to their side of the aisle? Presidents also are doing, again, they can't vote if a bill becomes a law, but they can absolutely help to build a coalition. They and the president's staff definitely have a list of representatives and senators that are going to vote for a certain bill, and they know, like, again, Congressman Box in, Congressman Dotson's out, Congressman Horak's in, Congressman Elwertowski's out. They clearly know, like, who's in, who's out, who's doing what. So they're kind of putting pressure on congressmen as well. Things that congressmen do to entice. They might do something called what's called pork barrel legislation. This is a big term, and they love to use it in the AP test. I would kind of get to know this one. Pork barrel legislation, the term stems from old slavery days, back when the slave's family would go to a central location. They'd have a big barrel, what's called salt pork, that you could kind of lop off a piece of that pork, and then you take it back to your family and cook it up, and that's what you'd have for dinner. They would call it bringing back the pork. Pork barrel legislation then would be you're bringing back the pork to your either home state or home district. If you're a representative, it's your home district. If you're a senator, it's your state. So maybe, let's say, Derek is not so keen on giving more money to the military, to the Defense Department. He's I don't want to do that. He's not for it. I, as a supporter, might pull him aside and say, hey, look, Derek, this is what we're going to do for you. If you notice in the bill, it says we have to open a military base, or it might say we have to buy more guns, and you have a gun company within Monroe County, the district that you represent. We're going to give a contract to that company to up their sales by 50%. So either that contract or opening or building a new factory or opening a military base or opening a government office. Any of those things are going to bring jobs and money back to Derek's district. That might persuade him to say, like, Monroe County is going to be much better off if I vote for this. I'm not necessarily for the idea of giving more money to the military, but this is going to help our citizens so much, I got to vote for it. So the idea of pork barrel legislation is having a congressman bring something back to their district or their state that's going to benefit them in a positive way. So oftentimes they will stick something in the idea of pork barrel legislation in order to entice certain congressmen to vote in favor. The other thing they do is something called log rolling. It's very simple. You vote for one of my proposals, I'm going to vote for one of yours. So it's the idea of trading favors, basically. I'm really not for this, you are. I've got a bill that I really need your vote on, and you're not so keen on it. I'll vote for yours, you vote for mine, and we both kind of get what we want. It's just basically trading favors. So that happens all the time, too. That's part of building a coalition. A lot of times people will say, like, building a coalition is like herding cats, because with all the different people that are trying to do it, interest groups, the president and other congressmen and the majority and minority parties, it's almost like you're in, you're out, maybe you're back in again. So let's look at Derek. Maybe Derek doesn't want to give more money to the military, so he says no. Then we put that pork barrel legislation there, say yes. And then some of the interest groups that gave him money during the election say, like, hey, we were all about, like, decreasing the military budget. You kind of went back on us. Like, we might not give you money next election. Maybe he's out again. So it's this constant, like, just because I got your vote today doesn't mean I have it tomorrow. So it's constantly keeping your coalition together. So that's kind of what it's all about. That's what this idea of coalition is all about. It's what makes American politics somewhat unique and somewhat exciting to watch. If you have any questions on this, please feel free to give me a holler. If not, I'm sure we'll be back in a moment with another one of these bad boys. So see you then.